So this is my trailer jig that I made from a boat trailer. Some of you may have seen it before, and some of you may not have seen it before. So what I basically did was I took this trailer apart, took everything off of it, and I set it underneath my lift, and I took an original 68 Mustang that was not wrecked, and I lowered it over top of this, and then I built all of the perches underneath. So what I ended up with was a spring perch mount on both sides, so the forward spring perch. There's also a hole that lines up with that bolt that goes up into the torque box or the rear frame rail section. In the back here I have two vertical pieces that have threaded bolts in them, and these align with the holes in the back of the frame rails. I also have another set of pieces that are not on display here that attach here, and what that is, it's a piece of pipe that comes up and it has a cross piece that goes through the spring shackle opening. So what that does is it gives me a height that I can verify, and I can remove that. I can also remove this for the most part. I can run the bolt down in. If I wanted to change out a frame rail, I could do that. So I have that on both sides. Also, I should point out I have 4 scissor jacks welded to it. So 2 here in the back and 2 up here in the front. Now along with that, I have on the side, these are pinch weld supports. So these were built to match the height of that 68 car when it was on the above the boat trailer. So that's, you know, should be accurate. These are mount points for the hole in the floor supports. So again, I can take those out. I can remove these. You saw that I ran the threads down and pulled that apart. So, or I ran the threads up in this case. So that puts everything in place from about the firewall back. Now I have other pieces that are not on here right now. I have another bracket assembly that mounts to the front here, and that supports the front frame rail where the 2 bolts go in for the bumper mount. And then this piece I added as well, and that has holes in it, and there's a piece that mounts to that that comes up, and bolts go through the frame rail where the drag link connects, and on that side it goes where the steering box connects. So everything on here can be removed. I could piece together a whole car based on my jig. And again, I put this on, or built this based on a 68 car, and then when I built the Cobra Jet, I took the original Cobra Jet, which was also not wrecked, put it on everything here, and it all lined up. So while this doesn't have, let's say, exact measurements that you would find online or in drawings or anything like that, I built this to match 2 cars that were straight and true. So now what I want to do is I'm going to start with the 68 fastback. So what I'll do, I have the 1-piece floor pan with the convertible inner rockers and bracing, and that'll be set on this, and from there I can start building up with the body and also put the front section on. So I'm going to see if I can get moving on this very soon. At this point I have removed the driver's side rocker panel, and we all know they're in good shape, they're galvanized, so no concerns there. I will straighten out the flanges, and this will be set aside. Now what I need to do is eliminate most of what's here in front of me, because I only have so much room in the garage, and I thought about just rolling this outside, and I could do that, but I don't know that I really want to, because I'm running out of places to put things. So what I'm thinking I might do is cut this up. I don't need anything in the back half, and I can cut up most of this and just put it on the back of my truck and haul it off for scrap later. I will save pieces and parts that may be valuable later, or be usable later. So in this case, it still has the tie downs right there that were the factory tie down pieces. So I'll save those, even though we can't use them on the other car because we're going to be doing something different with the suspension. But I can cut all that up. I can take the axle out from underneath it with the leaf springs, and that'll roll around by itself. All this other stuff can be cut up. And then the front section, I really think I'm going to cut it out, keep the floor supports intact, maybe just cut it straight behind or straight across the midsection here, and then come up with a way to hook it to my little tractor and just be able to pull this out of here and get it out of the way so that I can get the main trailer jig in here and make some progress. So I think I'm just going to start cutting and eliminating pieces and parts. So in order to get rid of the main part of the car, I had to remove the steering column. Now, it really only had one bolt holding it in, so it wasn't that hard to do. Here I'm jacking the front end up and removing the wheel dollies that I had underneath. You'll notice there's no leaf spring. Whoever worked on it before had taken all that apart, and they just put those wood blocks in there to make it not collapse. So I removed the wheel dollies from under the back as well, and then I positioned the jack under the side of the car because I knew I'd be cutting on it and I didn't want to have it fall in on itself. So I started cutting with the plasma cutter, and I was working on getting behind or cutting behind the floor supports. I figured that was the easiest way to section it out, and I wanted to remove the inner panel or the inner rocker panel to get it out of the way. So once I had that out of the way, I continued cutting, and I worked my way up into the transmission tunnel, staying behind the shifter opening, and I decided I would just try to keep all that together from the back of the floor supports moving forward, let's say. So here I also cut loose the inner rocker panel, and then I worked on cutting it loose from where the torque box is. So I did not want to cut into the torque box. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to use those later on another project. I want to keep that whole front end together just in case. But I cut loose that side piece, got it out of the way, and then I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to cut into the floor supports themselves. Surprisingly enough, these floor supports aren't even dented. A lot of times you'll see these where people have run a jack underneath it and they end up denting the underside because that's not really a jack point. They should be more forward where the torque box is. So I just cut loose the rest of it. I separated the back half of the car from the front half and then supported it with the jack stand. And then also wanted to make sure of what I had left with the front. Now, here I started cutting loose the midsection of the underneath the tail panel. And this cut pretty well. There was seam sealer in there. That's why you can see the color change on the plasma cutter. You can see it get kind of pinkish orange, and that's because of that seam sealer. So I got this piece out of the way, and then I decided that I would section off the rear frame rails. It really didn't matter where I cut them because I knew they weren't going to be salvaged anyway. So I started cutting and was working on getting the drop-off panel material out of the way, and then I bent all that up and got it out of my way so I could cut the frame rails. But I also I needed to take out the bolts that were in the spring shackles, and these are pretty snug. So I did use a mallet to knock them as far in or away from the center spring shackle, and then I put a wrench around them just to drive them out. And surprisingly, these were really, really tight. Now, these are the leaf springs that were underneath of jade. This whole setup was underneath of jade at one point. So then I bent the sheet metal out of the way using just a big crescent wrench, and I continued cutting and separating these rear pieces. So once those get cut loose, it's kind of funny, this whole section kind of will collapse, and it made it a lot easier for me to have these in smaller pieces because, you know, when you're trying to move this stuff around and you're doing it by yourself, you have to kind of think ahead a little bit as to what you can handle easily. So here you can see this part here, a little bit hanging on, then I was able to pull that apart. Did the same thing on the driver's side, and of course once it comes loose, the whole thing just kind of falls in on itself. So At this point, I decided that I would continue separating the front section, and I wanted to save the mount points for the rear seat. A lot of times those are actually either rusted into pieces or just in bad shape. And I don't know if they make them or not, but it's always worth it to hang on to those. So I traced out where I wanted to make some cuts, and I cleaned up the metal around the little mount point there and just cut around it. There's really nothing underneath this. This is just on top of the floor pan, so there's no bracing, there's no extra supports, but I needed to get all the seam sealer out of the way, so that's what I was doing there with the screwdriver, and of course knocking this one out and getting it loose as well. Later on, I did cut out the mount points for the rear seat belts. Sometimes it's worth it to have those pieces just in case you might need it in another project. So I do try to save whatever bits and pieces that I can. It just makes sense while you're there to do these sort of things. So here I cut through the back part of the tranny tunnel, and I cut around the rear torque boxes. This metal is pretty thick. The torque box themselves are pretty thick, but right next to them, it's just sheet metal. So it was easy enough to cut through all of that. And so I continued cutting around that, and then I cut the inner rocker panel as well so that it would collapse. And it just takes some time to make these cuts and make it happen, but plasma cutters are handy tools. Well, I've made some smaller pieces out of it. Now, what I plan to do, you can see I have this piece of 1-inch square tubing sticking out from under the tunnel. I'm going to make a cross piece here and use this as a tow bar. I want to be able to move this around, and it's kind of tail heavy at the moment, and I want to be able to hook my little tractor to it and just move it around. So I'll make something that will hook onto the cross member to hold it in place, and then put again a cross piece underneath between the floor supports and a little tongue on that bar, and then I can move this wherever I want. The rest of this is going away, obviously. This piece in the center, nothing really worth saving. I've already cut out the little seat hooks, and the rest of it is just scrap. And it's remarkable how light this is right now. I mean, it's all rusty and everything, but there's just no weight there. Now in the back here, I did cut off the rear frame rails and of course detach them from the springs, and I still have to take the fronts out, so not a big concern there. I may cut this piece into at least 2 pieces. I don't know yet. It's kind of bulky and heavy, so I have thought about, and here you can see how bad that frame was all kinked from the impact. In fact, it's bowed in right there in the middle. Yeah, and also when I was cutting this loose, all this stuff was just pop, pop, making loud noises while it was relieving all the stresses. But anyway, I'm not sure where I'm going to cut this just yet. I may cut it off there and over there, and I may split this down the center. I don't know. There's not a big demand for these pieces. I mean, you can buy the shock mount thing, so really no value in saving that. And the bracket over there might be worth saving for the brake hose. The seatbelt mounts maybe. Other than that, there's the parking brake pieces, but those usually come with the new frame rails anyway, so may not even matter much with that. But I'll cut this down into smaller pieces and get the rest of this out of the way so that I can get the trailer and all the other parts in here. Well, here's a Mustang kit. So here are the rear frame rails, spring shackles still attached. These are the forward spring mounts, so torque boxes, what's left of those. The piece that went underneath the tail panel. The transition pan, which I'm not going to use that. This thing is, I know it was twisted when it was wrecked. And of course the whole front section, which I'm going to set aside. And I made a little tow bar for this. So I clamped up some square tubing to the floor supports, and then I have this bar going through the center, and on it is basically a hook that goes around the cross member. So I'm going to get this out of the way and then roll in the trailer jig. And here's the 9-inch rear end. It was under this car. This was what I had in jade. And I don't plan to use this. This is an oddball rear end. This is out of a 59 Mercury station wagon from what I understand. So if you look those up, you'll understand. These are like 52¼ inches wide. So these are ideal for a 65 or 66 Mustang. And I actually had to add, or there were wheel spacers on this when I had it under jade, 1¼ inch just to make the wheels work because it's so narrow. And it also has great big brake drums on it. So this is an oddball rear end. But that's going to be set aside as well because I don't have a plan for that. Otherwise, I'm going to get this out of the way. And also, I point this out. You know, I put these blankets up on the roll-up door that I have. I bought a kit that I'm going to try to use, Blue Tex insulation, and that is a thin insulation that gets taped basically to the roll-up door, and hopefully it'll help, because putting these up is not the best thing to do, or not the most fun. But if I can get that stuff on and up to work, and I may post a video of that on my other channel on Joe Daddy's Workshop. So anyway, let's clean the garage out. Well, I didn't get as far as I wanted to get. However, I have all the parts in here now. So, as an example, here is the back upper panel brace that goes behind the seat. In this box there are torque boxes and a variety of other pieces. Trunk lid, or deck lid. This piece is the radiator core support. Here is the roof. Left and right aprons, one piece with the shock tower delete. New rear valance with the cutouts for the dual exhaust. Of course, the whole side, driver's side of the car. Both quarter panels. Up here I have the tail panel. I have a new front valance here. And back here I have the other side of the car and the firewall. And of course I have the floor pan on the jig. In this box there are other pieces like the deck filler corner pieces that go to the tail panel from the quarters. There's also hardware here for the fold down or trapdoor rear seat option. Here is the deck filler panel. I forget what this one is. It's trim molding, rear filler, trim molding. I'll have to open that up later. Here are the rain gutters. Here are the fore and aft header panels that go up under the roof. Come over to this side, and this is a box with the trunk lid hinges in it. Here is the trap door behind rear seat. Here is the kit for all the brackets and hardware that go onto the floor in various other places. And so I got this far. I got everything in here, and that's enough. You know, cutting up that other Mustang, getting it out of the way was enough of a chore, and now I can do some fine tuning. I want to make sure I have everything lined up as it should be on my jig. Of course, I'll have to level that out. I will be working on removing the original, or well, the aftermarket rocker panels from the sides of the car, because I'm using the originals on here. And from there, it's just going to be a lot of test fitting and making sure everything lines up before I weld anything together as usual. So, there we are. Mustang in a box. Well, I think this is going to be a fun project. You know, I've done the 69 Cobra Jet on this jig, and I'm looking forward to building this car. There's going to be a lot going on with this project moving forward. Plenty of stuff coming up in future videos. At this point, I want to thank my patrons who continue to support me and help me continue to make these videos. I appreciate them so much. And if you are interested in becoming a patron, there is a link in the description below. Also, there are links to other products that I use from Amazon or welders and different things like that. So check those out. And if you would, leave a comment, and a thumbs up. And that'll be it. So until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya.